welcome everyone to Democratization of Data with Dynamics 365 Customer Insights. I realize it's quite a mouthy title, and that's by design because I'm going to try and explain why around the democratization wording as well, so everyone has an understanding of what that means. But to me, it's essentially making stuff easier and more palatable in terms of data and having an easier time with it. So we're going to look at customer insights today, which is one of the products in the Dynamics suite. I'm going to have a series of videos showing you some of the capabilities and what it can do, what it can achieve, and we'll talk around why as well, as in why did this product come about? What does it do? What does it try and solve? So firstly, I'm Kevin Ingrey. There's all of my social details. If anyone wants to catch up after the event, by all means, contact me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I'm a solution enterprise architect for Quantic, who are based out of London, and basically I help lead an awful lot of their pre-sales activities around customer engagement, Power Platform, and the Microsoft Azure platform as well. A lot of experience in D365 customer engagement primarily, and like everyone else, got all the badges of all the various different qualifications you can get. But I work for Quantic, who are Microsoft Inner Circle partner, and yeah, I help basically design and build solutions, and that's all for Quantic. So what do we have in terms of a problem with customer data? I've put this slide in at the very beginning because we generally see that lots of companies have data. Data is fantastic. Data is the new oil. Data is, valuable, but actually it's completely, meaningless without what I would class as insight. So we have all of our customer data in different sources. You might have an e-commerce platform. You might have website data. You might have customer portals, etc., etc. Lots of disparate data sets that you've organized into these perfect, beautiful data tables. Okay, what do you do with them? That's the big question mark. What can you do before you can actually realize benefit and value out of data? So that's kind of a big problem that we see, and I in particular see with customers and people out there, that they have loads of data, but it's disparate. It's valueless until you're able to gain insight. And how do we do that? Well, we start using the idea of D365 customer insights. But before that, what we're seeing and what Microsoft are seeing in particular are that lots of experiences of a customer are falling short. So they're frustrated by inconsistent experiences, not being able to be known by a retailer, for instance, across the different channels they engage with them on, and being frustrated about, irrelevant content to me. There's a big push for personalization around your client and customer experience. So being able to understand an individual, who they are, what they've shopped with you, for instance, or what they've done with you in the past as an organization is really, really key. Some really good examples that I've seen in a personal sort of scenario. I've, had holidays and stuff booked and then cancelled because of COVID-19, and I had different experiences with different organizations around that. Some of the organizations knew who I was when I called them up and spoke to them and gave them my details. They could see my information at a glance with modern sort of, business systems allowing them to do so. Other organizations, would get back to me in days and ask me the same question time and time again, or not have the notes or details of what I've said to them. Basically, having one really good experience and one sort of really bad because they don't know or can't see data around me, the individual. And that's resulted in some of the examples of consumers stopping doing business with certain brands because of a frustrating experience. And Customer Insights is a tool that's been brought out by Microsoft to essentially solve that. So what do we have? We have data in an organization. We have data. Really, really great. Lots of different sources, external sources, internal sources. Customer data, you might have it across numerous different platforms, numerous different products. Fantastic. But in isolation, it's meaningless. So Customer Insights takes your data, connects it all together, and begins what we class as a unification process. So we can take data from your e-commerce platform, from your website, from your POS system, from your marketing system, from your CRM, or your customer engagement platforms, and take them and bring them together to create that single view of a customer. It's been, a sort of buzzword in, business applications industry for a number of years, the single view. Customer Insights is a tool designed to help you build that. And what we do is we ingest data, we map and match data to basically create a unified profile, which is known as conflation, taking lots of different data sources together into one. And then we can use tools around customer insights like enrichment to enhance our data sets further. So this is the first step on the journey, is getting data into the platform and unifying it to create a single profile. Great, we've now got a single profile and we can see more about our customer in one place. That's improving things. That's not going far enough. The next level from that is insight. So now that I've got this data around my customers, unified, beautifully presented and understood, what does that mean? Well, actually, we can then start applying analytics, artificial intelligence and machine learning on top of that to understand and get insight. This is something that you wouldn't know today about your data. So, as a retailer, let's choose a coffee, company as an example. What's the average spend of a customer? I don't know, because it comes across multiple different data sources. I go and create a report for that. Okay, but what if I needed it now? Customer Insights gives you that ability to dive into the data and understand more. So we then start using the data in a more appropriate method. But that's great. So now I know something about my data, and I've got a bit more information than I had in the past because I didn't have my data sets tied together. What does that mean? Well, actually, now you can start doing the final piece of the puzzle, which is actions. So as part of the process, we've understood our data, we've unified it into a single view, got some insight out of it, and then I can do something based off of that insight. So it could be that we've got an example in some of the sessions or stuff that I'll be showing is that there's potentially the idea that a customer might leave you because of certain data. If we could then do an action to stop that, we retain a customer, which is great news as a potential retailer, for instance, or someone with a customer base. So being able to understand your data from start to finish, get ideas and insight out of it, making it valuable, making it better than it is now, and then the final piece is being able to action off of that. So being able to change a behavior, inspire a customer to stay with you. Perhaps they're at risk of not signing up for a subscription next year, so we offer them I don't know, a 10% discount via Dynamics 365 marketing to entice them to stay. Would that positivity and that action change the course of what the data is telling us? So that's sort of the journey of customer insights. It takes data from disparate data sources, creates a unified profile of your customer, and then lets you to understand insight about that data and make actionable elements on top of it. Okay. So why does, what's the difference between Dynamics 365, customer insights and generally speaking, doing this in a data warehouse? Well, actually, at the moment, we've got like the status quo, which is disparate data sources, spread across multiple systems, no sort of taxonomy to that, and the line of business applications do all of the analytics for you. So it's very siloed. It's not a general approach. You could do a data warehouse to bring all that together. That's quite a logistically heavy thing to do, and often involves very technical skills and resources to achieve that. So customer insights comes out as a customer focused and tool that an end user could use to start trying to do this. This is where that word democratization comes in. We're taking what would be a very tricky and for instance very SQL heavy approach to data and making it easy, digestible and usable by anyone. Like most of the Dynamics applications, they're designed to be used from the sort of, like the Power Platform, low code aspects, and for people to just pick up and go and try stuff. So that's where customer insights sort of comes in. And it helps, unify that customer data for us, join it all up and give us a nice, easy, user-friendly tool to do so. So I'm going to do a few videos now that I've pre-recorded of some of the stuff around customer insights, showing you exactly how to do certain features, and starting from adding data sources all the way through to adding relationships, and also showing you some of the enrichment capabilities. So the key phases that you're going to see in some demonstrations: ingestion of customer data, the map, match and merge functionality, so creating and identifying a unique user profile from disparate data sources, conflating them, which means bringing them together into a single unified profile, enriching that activity, so adding on to your data set with using additional capabilities from the Microsoft Graph platform, such as brand affinities, getting some insights, so creating some measures so we can understand something that our data is telling us, and then finally creating actionable elements on top of that. So we're going to start with understanding data sources, so absorbing data into customer insights. So I'm just going to play a video for you guys. Hopefully the sound will play. Please let me know if it doesn't.
In this demonstration, we are going to begin adding our first data source to customer insights. From our home screen, we click the data sources area. To add a data source, we can click either of the Add Data Source options on the screen. We will then be presented with options around what type of data we want to connect to. In this scenario, we'll be adding a CSV file of customer-related data from our mock commerce platform into customer insights. So let's click the Import Data section. We are, however, presented with other options of ingesting data, such as from an Azure Data Lake Common Data Model folder, or directly from the Common Data Service. This allows us to bring data from other first-party apps from Microsoft, like Dynamics 365 Sales, directly into customer insights. Clicking the Next button, we are presented with a screen to begin naming our data source. Good naming conventions at this point are really key, so choose an effective name that adequately describes where the data underneath the data source comes from. In this example, I've chosen e-commerce for my data source name, as I'm bringing data from my e-commerce platform into customer insights. Clicking the Next button, we can now see the data source options available to us, which is a pretty comprehensive list that's being added to all the time. For now, let's add a CSV file with e-commerce data. We can add a file path or URL to get our CSV file, and if needed, we have options to authenticate or access via an on-premises gateway. Clicking Next will be taken to a preview screen showing us an example of what our dataset looks like. On this screen, we can specify file origin type, the delimiter, and how Customer Insights detects the data type of the columns, which we can manipulate before ingestion. Clicking the Transform Data button, we are taken to a Power Query screen where we can further manipulate our data. Firstly, let's ensure that the first rows of our CSV are used as our column headers, so they are easily identifiable. With one click of the Use First Row as Headers button, we now have our columns labeled appropriately. As we have imported a CSV file, all of our columns are assumed to be text data types, where we can manipulate and update individual columns as necessary. Clicking the column header label, we can change our columns to various different types, such as currency or date time types, as you would using a product like Microsoft Excel. So let's modify our date of birth and created on columns to be the appropriate type. In this example, we need to make date of birth a date time type and created on a date time zone type. We should also modify the query name, as you can have multiple queries under a singular data source. For example, under our e-commerce data source, we are adding our e-commerce contacts, but we could also add our e-commerce purchases under this data source as well. Finally, clicking Next, we can begin our ingestion of data into Customer Insights. Now, Customer Insights will begin refreshing and ingesting our data into the platform. We have now successfully added our first data source into the platform, and we can begin adding more data sources to enhance our understanding of our customers.
Okay, so hopefully you've seen and hopefully heard me on that video demonstration explaining how you can bring data sources into Customer Insights. Please let me know if you can't hear the sound at all, and I'll try and rectify that. But yeah, what does it do? Well, in summary, we've seen a wide range of data sources. It uses the Power Query capabilities that you might see with Power BI. So you can bring lots of different data sources and data types into the customer insights platform. We can then add, review, transform, and manipulate our data sources at that point before we bring them into customer insights. So you've seen some usage of Power Query to manipulate the data and refine it somewhat. And then finally, we've reviewed the sort of data as it's come into the platform. So you can add lots of different data sources. Okay, moving on from there, we're going to take a look at the map, match, and merge functionality. This is pretty much the key element of customer insights and the why into the product. So why would you potentially look at customer insights to do something like this? It's because it helps you bring and create that singular view. So we're going to have a few different data sources. We're going to then start doing the map, match, and merge functionality to bring them together. So that idea of conflation, taking many data sources into one.
Following on from the last video, I've added a few more data sources, covering data from a loyalty scheme system, a point of sale till system, and data from our website reviews area into customer insights. Now that we have multiple data sources around our customer, we can begin our map, match, and merge processes. Let's start by mapping our e-commerce contacts to our loyalty contacts to represent our unified customer profile. Under the map heading within the Unify section, click the Select Entities button. We can now select our e-commerce contacts and our loyalty contact entities and click Done to map these entities together. We are now presented with the mappings of our entities against the standard model types. Customer Insights has automatically matched a number of our fields against the standard model types, such as city matching the location.city type. Where it cannot automatically match our fields, we can select them via the type drop-down lists. We now have to choose the primary key for each entity that we have ingested. So let's select Contact ID for e-commerce contacts and Loyalty ID for loyalty customers and hit the Save button in the top left. We can now begin the match process. So let's click Match in the menu to begin determining the order that our profiles merge and the priority of which sources are used for attributes. We begin by clicking the Match Set Order button. And in the primary drop-down, we select e-commerce contacts as the primary source and make sure to include all records. In the Entity 2 drop-down, we select the Loyalty Customers entity and again include all records and click Done. Now we need to create match rules that are used to match records together and can consist of single rules like those based on an ID or multiple conditions like full name, postcode, and date of birth. For this exercise, we'll create a rule focusing on full name and email. So let's create a new rule and give it its logical name. So we'll use full name email for this rule. We'll add our first condition and select full name in both entities. And let's set the precision to high. This sets how tight we want the fields to match using an element of fuzzy logic, with exact being only those that completely match being bound together. We can also normalize values within the full name field by clicking Normalize. We add our second condition by clicking the Add Condition button, and this time we select the email fields and click Done. We can now click Save and then Run to begin matching our customer data from two disparate sources together to create a single, true view of our customer. When that's completed successfully, you will see the unique customer records identified within your datasets, and then finally the total amount of records that have been matched. If you expand the rule area, you can see in detail the record match percentage and a match preview, which will show you the records that have been matched and the percentages score for the conflation. Conflation is the terminology for merging two pieces of data together. This is a really great way of understanding how the matching engine works and how we go about creating a unified customer profile. Now that we've matched our customer records together, we have one final task ahead of us. We can now begin the merge phase to reconcile the conflicting data and define attributes within our customer profiles. We can now merge an attribute that exists across all of our data sources that represent the same piece of data. For example, date of birth could be consistent across our datasets. When in the merge section, we can see the fields that have been merged, edit them, and if necessary, reorder the rankings of the merge, which is useful if one source is a particular master dataset. The only fields that can't be merged are those that we listed as primary keys. Once we are happy, we can run the final unification step. To recap, we've taken disparate data sources, ingested them into customer insights, mapped them together, match the fields between the sources, and finally, merged our data to create a singular customer profile.
Okay, so again, in summary, what we've seen there is basically the crux of customer insights. Taking data in, the first step, then being able to map entities together, match them, so deciding which order certain entities need to be ranked in. So for instance, you might have a piece of data that, email, for instance, which comes from, say, your customer record system, that also matches, say, your loyalty program. And it working out and deciding which order of preference to take that data into customer insights in order to build the profile. And then finally, merging the entities together. So being able to say, date of birth, for instance, in the example, that exists in two of our data sources. So we're going to merge those together, those records together, and again set the priorities on that. So it's a really cool tool, basically, to bring and understand data, but ultimately get that singular view of your customer base. So really, really, really crucial, and basically the key step in the customer insights platform. So going on from there, we've now got the idea of our unified profile. So we had 5,000 customer profiles in the platform. 4,000 of those were actually merged together from different data sources. So we've got a really good data set of customers who've got pieces of information from our disparate data sources being unified. So now we're at that point where we've taken data in, we've ingested it, we've conflated it, and we're looking to get insight. So we can create relationships, which will help us define and understand the links between entities, like you would in customer engagement, for instance. So having a referential ability to link pieces of data together. And then looking at defining measures. Measures are the sort of key understanding around insights in the customer insights tool, which let you create pieces of information. So I can do stuff like add different data sources together and give me a total value. Say, for instance, average customer spend, or total customer spend across lots of different data sources in customer insights. Let's take a look at that.
Following on from our mapping, matching, and merging process, we now have a single view of our customer in place. Behind the scenes, I've created some search and filter indexes that will allow us to navigate our customer profiles with ease. I can search on names, emails, date of birth, postal codes, etc. to drill into my customer list effectively. Now we've got our unified profile, we can start to explore the true power of the Customer Insights tool to generate measures, which are key performance indicators that reflect our business performance and that let us see detail about our customers. This allows us to gain a critical element in our journey, which is insights about our data. To enable this, we also have a capability called relationships that let us identify links between our unified profiles that we've created and additional datasets like web purchases and store purchases. Relationships help connect entities for us to then measure the data. For example, one customer might be able to make multiple web purchases, and we might want to create a measure to see the total amount of their web purchases over time. Behind the scenes, I've created some relationships that will enable us to create our measures. We can now begin creating our first measure. Measures are split into three types. A customer attribute, which shows a single field on the customer profile, useful for things like lifetime values or total spends. Customer measures, which give us an insight into the behavior of our customers. And business measures that track business-specific data points, such as company performance and health. Let's now create a measure. For this example, we'll create a business measure to show the average store purchase value. Firstly, we select our measure, give it an appropriate name, and can then build it out using the tools available to us, like functions. Functions give us the ability to apply logic to our data, such as determining the average value or a minimum or maximum value. This is the key to letting us build out our measures with more detail so that we can understand our data and gain true insight into it. Once our measure has been created, we can see on the home screen our key business measures in action, delivering instant business value to us. Now let's take a quick look at customer attribute. I've pre-built some of the measures already, but I'm at a key stage where I can create a variable. Variables allow us to create expressions that utilize operators to add, subtract, multiply, and bring two fields together from different data sources. This is a great way of making our disparate data sources unified to give us a measurable outcome. I've again added a number of measures, and we can now see them in action to get a feel for our customers and how our business is doing. We can then use these for instant understanding, but also primarily as a capability to segment our customers, that we can use that data in other platforms like our marketing tools, such as Dynamics 365 Marketing.
Okay, so what we've seen there is a real brief run through of the ability to create a single view of the customer and create some measures. So we're going to see the ability again of measures coming up time and time again in the customer insights world. So you've seen the chance to create a measure showing, lifetime spend or values. So if I have lots of different transactional databases for customers across different platforms, so e-commerce is a great one. Your POS systems in store, for instance, as well as loyalty platforms. Bringing that data together to understand your customer is really, really quite crucial. So being able to see at a glance, this is my average spend across my entire customer base from all my various different, commerce related platforms is quite powerful. And then deeper diving into the customer itself and seeing that this customer has an average spend of this. Well, that could be that's higher than my average spend, or it could be lower. I can then use that data to begin segmenting groups of individuals or people within the customer insights tool, so I can actually say, well, actually I want to look at high value customers, or I'd like to look at people that have purchased from our e-commerce platform. Creates the ability to segment and bring together an understanding of our customer base. So let's go take a look at segmenting our customers. One of the things that's really quite key to know is that once you create a segment, they can be exported or used in other platforms. So native integrations, with D365 Marketing and lots of other platforms as well. So it's kind of like a marketing list in a lot of ways. So segmenting our customers is a really sort of cool tool now that we've got the data together. So let's take a quick look at that.
In this demonstration, we are going to begin creating actionable engagements from our data to create segments, which we can do by clicking the New Segment button. A segment is a slice of our dataset based around a certain requirement, such as if we want to find high-value customers or a group of customers so we can market to them. Dynamic segments are a group that updates every 12 hours, perfect for constantly changing data points like higher value customers, or static segments are used to define a list of customers at a point in time. We are going to create a segment from one of our measures that we created earlier. We do this by clicking the New button and expanding the drop-down and selecting Create from Measure. Let's find our high-value customers based on their lifetime spend. We get given a fantastic graph view of our values by percentile, which helps us break down and understand the data better. So let's choose to find our top 25% of customers by selecting the greater than operator and selecting the value of 4,364 as highlighted to us in the graph. Hitting the Review button, we can now see the key detail about our segment and an opportunity to give it a name. So let's call it Top 25% of Customers. This will then queue the segment for creation and bring our top 25% of our customer base into our segment for us. When completed, we can see the results of our segment and discover we have 910 customers in our top 25% of customers in total. With our segment complete, we can now bring the data into other tools, such as in the Microsoft ecosystem or third-party products via the Export Destinations area.
Okay, so segments in summary, our way of grouping and our way of understanding what our customer data is telling us now that we've got that insight element understood. So I can create stuff like my top 25% of customers, or rank my customers by a certain piece of data that we understand about them, and then export that into Dynamics 365 Marketing, for instance, to use it as a segment there for a campaign, or bring it into other platforms as necessary. So it's a real great way of, now that we've got this unified profile, of actually understanding something about it. So going into the sort of final few little demonstrations now, the extensibility options. What can you do with customer insights on top of bringing it all together to create a singular view of your customer? So there are some cool extensibility features in terms of enrichment. And as we discussed earlier, enrichment is the ability to take our data set as we understand it now and apply additional data sets on top of it. Now, this is an area that I'm really quite interested in. And it's in preview, but something that you can go and try today and see how it works. But over time, the potential for enrichment is fantastic. You have a vast data set around your customer base, for instance. Wouldn't it be great to apply understood data on top of that to make inferences about what or how your customers might respond to certain things? So for instance, do they have any brand affinities or interests? So in the preview, which we're going to show you in this next video, we're going to bring in some affinities around potential interest in certain brands. So it will show you that ability. Now, this is where customer insights, I think, in the future is going to get really quite clever, because the enrichment side of things, especially around common data sets or publicly available data sets to do demographic data, could I make inferences around my customer base if I know the demographics? So are my high value customers more likely to be a certain age group or gender banding, for instance, or people in a certain location, are they likely to spend more money with me and my organization? Can I do stuff to understand or predict what the buying patterns might be like? That's where the sort of enrichment capabilities can really come to the front in the future. So it's quite a relatively new area, and I'm expecting that they'll add an awful lot more capability over time. And you're starting to see some of that bleeding into the platform now. So yeah, let's take a look at adding some enrichment to our data set using brand and interests.
Now that we've seen all of the core of customer insights, we can start looking at the extensibility options and the additional capabilities it can bring to your organization. From integrating with other applications like Dynamics 365 Marketing, Power Automate, and Power Apps, to building your very own prediction models, customer insights brings extensive capability to any organization. In some of these examples, we're going to see some of these capabilities. So let's focus on data enrichment, using freely available data sources to enhance our data, and also building a churn risk subscription model. So let's enrich our data by clicking the enrichment tab and starting the enrichment process. We're presented with some predefined industries and brands that we can apply to match our business. Enrichment simply gives us a way of enhancing our data by suggesting affinities our customers may have towards a particular brand or interest. The enrichment process will then take our customer data, look for people that are in a similar age, gender, or location bracket, and calculate their affinities and interests. I'm going to add some brands and interests relative to a mock coffee company using customer insights. I will need to map some key fields from our datasets to provide the enrichment process with suitable customer data points to infer options against. The enrichment process will now begin and may take some time depending on your data volumes. It's also worth noting that this is a current preview feature that will hopefully be expanded with more detail and better enrichment capabilities over time. Once it has been completed, we can see the amount of enriched customers and the potential interests and brand affinities that it has detected. Clicking View Enriched Data lets us explore this in more detail. From here, we can click into our customer profiles, which now show us the enriched data, and we can use that further, such as in segments, to align interests to ways of targeting our customer base.
Okay, so what we've seen just in that video there is some of the enrichment capabilities and bringing additional data into the data sets that you've already got. So we can start, seeing potential interests around customers. Say you are a coffee company and you've got customer insights, and I can look and see what my competitor profiles might be like with my customer base based around their sort of demographic data. This is one area that I really hope is going to expand over time with a lot more capability, because then it becomes a sort of game-changing application on top of being already fantastic. So it's something that will evolve over time and add more data sets and more options to enhance the data that you already have. So following on from that, we're going to take a look at adding activity data into customer insights. So activity data being stuff that happens with your customer base. Say, for instance, you might have POS purchases. You might want to actually see them in your customer timeline, or see the ability to add when someone's subscribed to a product, for instance, and see it again in that unified customer profile view.
Another key element we can achieve is to enhance our customer profile with activity and timeline data, such as purchases, which can be brought into Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform for use outside of the Customer Insights application. Let's add an activity by filling in all of the pertinent details to define it, and then create a relationship to match it back to our unified customer profile. I've added a few more activities, and we can now select Run to add them to our customer profiles. From here, we can navigate to a customer and see a timeline of activity across our various disparate data sets into one singular unified customer profile.
So again, in summary, what we've seen there is the ability to enrich our data, and the ability to add additional functionalities around activities. So being able to use some of our data sets and adding those into our customer timeline, basically making our profile more valuable to us. Now, moving on from here, that's the sort of end of the sort of slides and the demonstration. So it's basically time for a bit of a Q&A. So if there's any questions or queries, do shout. But one final thing that I just wanted to say is Customer Insights is honestly a fantastic tool when you see what it's able to do from sort of start to finish. And that key word around this session, the democratization, it's user friendly. Okay, you can bring data into it, you can manipulate it, but you don't need to be, an expert in data or SQL to be able to do that. Sure, you'll probably need some example or some idea of Power Query to bring the data sources in, but actually using the product is relatively straightforward. So that democratization aspect, giving power to anyone who wants to be able to do more with their data. The product itself, I've got really high hopes for it, and expect to see it become not just what's classed as a customer data platform as it is now, but become more of an experience product over time, which is what I would like to see, where it joins up more intuitively with D365 marketing, for instance, because the power in the data, once you understand it and what you can get out of it insight-wise, is entirely valuable to marketing. So, for instance, we spoke around the potential of understanding whether a customer is likely to churn. So, not subscribe to something, for instance, if we have that. And just to let you guys know, Customer Insights has some AI models being brought into it, like churn risk ratings, which help you understand whether someone who is a subscriber to something that you may sell as an organization is likely to carry on subscribing. And you can use that to do a risk modeling aspect. So those that are flagged as likely to churn, that's us gaining insight and understanding that, and then we can perform actions on top of it to try and stop it. So this is where the product hopefully become a more of an experience product rather than just a data platform. So then we can, when we've identified those individuals, we put them into a segment, and then we use that with marketing, for instance, to try and entice them to potentially change that behavior, to stop what the data is telling us in terms of the insight, and using that actionable element of Customer Insights to change something that is a risk to us and our organization. So that's my hope for Customer Insights. It is a really great tool as is, but has the potential to be fantastic in terms of the experience and the overall joined up approach with the rest of the business application suite from Microsoft. So thank you all for listening. At this moment in time, if there's any questions, by all means shout, and I'm happily answer. There was one in the chat from earlier from Jessica. Why would you not put the data in Power BI first and then just chuck that into Customer Insights to get the intelligence? Right. Well, you could. is the answer. You could bring that in as a data source, and if you needed to do advanced manipulation, I'd probably say that might be a great way of doing it. The idea is that customer insights in its own right is a tool for sort of bringing that together and creating a unified profile. So there's nothing stopping you doing that. One of the options with customer insights is actually bring your own data lake. So if you're doing stuff with data already, you can bring it into customer insights and just use the tool to do some of that stuff. So there's nothing stopping that. It largely depends on what your data is like. If your data is relatively well maintained and understood, use customer insights. If it's a bit more messier and a bit more real world, probably the best way to put it, you might want to do some manipulation up front just to get it a bit more friendlier to use with customer insights. So there is nothing stopping you doing that. It's just the customer insights is an easier undertaking, I guess, than having to work with Power BI, for instance, and creating a data source from scratch and bringing that all together. We have the logic and the tools in customer insights to pick and choose fields, whereas in Power BI and the data modeling world, you'd have to go and do that yourself. So there is the element of that could be done. It's probably more advanced in terms of skill set requirement than say what customer insights will require. So answering your question in a bit of a roundabout way, but the answer is yes, you could, but here's some reasons why you might not.
Yeah, I think it probably depends on who's going to be sort of responsible for administering it and dealing with it and digesting it, really, doesn't it? Because watching all through of that, I mean, yeah, I'm just, like I said, thinking, well, why don't you just do that all in Power BI? Because you can get insights out of your data in Power BI, but it depends how sort of data mindset you are, I guess, how used to digesting data you are. I'm quite used to doing analysis on data, so to me, I don't really see much of the benefit of the customer insights tool.
But then compare yourself to someone, say, in marketing who knows this data exists in their organization, may have access to it, but doesn't have the skill set to do that. Then that becomes that sort of democratization aspect. For someone like myself, I'm from a technical background. I might do it a slightly different way because I have the skill set, for instance, to go and work in a certain way. But customer insights is that bringing it home to the democratization aspect again. So like the rest of the Power Platform, designed to be relatively easy to pick up and run with. This is another tool in the arsenal to do more and get more out of a potential investment in Dynamics. But generally speaking, how many organizations do you think are actually bringing their data together like that? Yeah, it's a nice story. Everyone loves the idea of a single view of the customer, but actually the undertaking of achieving that is relatively tough. We've done a lot, and I've done in particular a lot of projects for customers where you are looking to do that and achieve that, especially in from someone from a customer engagement background. How many times you created for like a new entity to bring data from another platform into customer engagement to try and achieve this. What we're saying, or what Microsoft is saying now, is, well, use this tool to bring it all together, and then what you can do with some of the extensibility of that, which we haven't touched on here, but this is like a level 100 scenario, but you could bring that data back into, say, customer engagement and have cards showing up in the timeline that someone has purchased something, and start getting that singular view of data wherever you need it. So it's it's a great tool to give people who can't do this sort of thing a way of trying to achieve it. For those technically minded, we might do it another way. But generally speaking, we could probably do that effort up front, give it to someone as a data source, and they use customer insights and then build the measures and stuff themselves. So even if techier people want to build the data, that's fine. We can still give them the tool to actually do what they need, create the segments, because we're probably not going to touch that, or not want to be on I guess on the hook for managing that long term. You might be a warehouse data warehouse person or SQL expert, but you probably don't want to create marketing segments. Give that to the team marketing, for instance. Give them customer insights as an applicable layer to do that. Okay.
Yeah, it's about empowering other people, isn't it? So you can all do the same thing, but everyone just has a different tool to do it, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Coming at it from a different skill set and having a way of doing it, which, you know, a couple of years ago wouldn't have happened. Yeah. Okay, hopefully that answers the question. Good discussion.
Lovely, thank you.
Just a little bit more though, like customer insights, because it is a part of the Power Platform. You can, with the extensions, like integrate with Power Automate, etc. So if customer insights is refreshed and you notice somebody else appears in like your segment, then you could actually go off and do other things, which with Power BI wouldn't actually be possible. So it is a little bit more
responsive.
Yeah, it's a lot more responsive. And also with that, I've actually done things where within Power Virtual Agent, it looks into the customer insights database and then makes decisions. You know, so and then you can also it's quite good. Definitely.
Trisha, it's probably more exploitable than Power BI, I guess, to some degree, because you've got more capability. To some degree, again, of getting at this sort of stuff and doing more with it. It's, you know, at home within business applications, it's more, you know, like you say, getting stuff out of Power Automate and doing it via Power Virtual Agent. So if I'm having a conversation with someone, you know, I could go off and work out and see if they're at risk of churning, for instance, you know, in the future, and then making a different pathway in terms of a Power Virtual Agent to discuss that or manipulate how that conversation goes or change the tactic in some cases. So it gives you, it's a very expansive product. We've touched on, you know, literally just scratched the surface. But yeah, there's much more capability under the hood in terms of what you can do, especially when you start looking at, you know, its extensibility in terms of API. And yeah, it's just, you know, like I say, real cool tool. It's a lot of fun to play with, and hopefully it's going to get an awful lot better in terms of the overall immersion and experience for the customer as well in the future.
Super.
Okay. If there's any more questions, now's the time to shout. Otherwise, we're finished for today. Okay, I think that's it from everyone then. So again, just want to say a big thank you to everyone for joining. Hopefully it's been useful. And by all means, you know, catch me in the Q&A for the presenters later if there are any questions that you want to pick up on. But yeah, thank you very much for listening, and see you guys again soon.